Most rock bands don't survive 10 years. The Rolling Stones survived more than 60. They survived riots, overdoses, arrests, scandals, the death of band members, and every prediction that rock and roll would die. But now, at nearly 80 years old, the Stones are doing something nobody expected again. They're building mystery. Over the last few weeks, strange billboards started appearing around the world. Different languages, cryptic messages, hidden clues. Fans were confused. Some thought it was a fashion campaign. Others believed it was a farewell tour. But then, the internet noticed something strange. A secret vinyl release, a fake band name from 1977, and a hidden date, July 10th. And suddenly, one question exploded across the rock world. Why are the Rolling Stones acting like a hungry young band again? Because this might not just be another album, this could be the final chapter of the greatest rock and roll story ever told. To understand why this album feels so important, we need to realize one thing people often forget. The Rolling Stones were never supposed to last this long. This band was born in the early 1960s, long before the internet. Streaming or social media even existed. They survived cultural revolutions, changing generations, and the complete transformation of the music industry. Yet somehow they're still standing today. Many of their rivals disappeared. Many rock legends collapsed because of age, addiction, ego, or death. But the Stones kept moving forward like a machine that simply refused to stop. But this time, things feel different. Rock music no longer dominates the charts the way it once did. A new generation grew up with hip-hop, electronic pop, and 15-second viral songs on TikTok. And after the death of Charlie Watts in 2021, many fans truly believed this was the end of the Rolling Stones. Because Charlie wasn't just the drummer. He was the heartbeat of the band. Quiet, elegant, the calm center between the chaos of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards for more than 50 years. When Charlie died, for the first time ever, the Rolling Stones suddenly felt vulnerable. And that's exactly why this comeback feels so emotional. Instead of fading away quietly as a nostalgia act, they came back acting like a hungry young band again. Cryptic billboards, secret vinyl releases, hidden clues. Everything feels like a message to the world that they are not finished yet. And maybe that's what makes this story powerful. Not because the world desperately needs another Rolling Stones album, but because after more than 60 years, the Rolling Stones still have a reason to fight. Then came the part that made this entire comeback even stranger. The marketing. Because the Rolling Stones didn't announce this album like normal artists do. There was no dramatic press conference. No giant social media countdown. No polished Hollywood-style trailer. Instead, they chose mystery. Across different cities, fans started spotting strange billboards with hidden messages, different languages, cryptic phrases, tiny details that didn't seem important at first. But the internet did what the internet always does. People started investigating everything. Fans zoomed into photos, decoded symbols, compared locations, searched old interviews. Reddit threads exploded overnight. Suddenly, people weren't just waiting for an album anymore. They were hunting for clues. And that's what made this campaign brilliant. Because the Rolling Stones understand something modern music often forgets. Mystery creates obsession. In today's world, artists constantly flood social media with content every single day. Endless posts, endless updates, endless promotion, but the Stones went the opposite direction. They stayed quiet and let the fans create the noise for them. The more mysterious the campaign became, the more people talked about it. And then came one detail that shocked longtime fans the most. The name The Cockroaches, a fake band identity connected to the Stones, dating all the way back to 1977. Suddenly, hardcore fans realized this wasn't random marketing anymore. This was the Rolling Stones playing with their own history. And maybe that's the smartest part of all. Because after 6 decades, the Rolling Stones no longer need attention. But somehow, they still know exactly how to control it. But the strangest clue in this entire campaign wasn't the billboard. It was a name. The Cockroaches. To casual fans, it might sound like a random joke. But to hardcore Rolling Stones fans, that name immediately felt suspicious. Because long before the internet, Long before viral teasers and modern marketing campaigns, the Rolling Stones had secretly used that alias before, and suddenly, a name from the past appeared again, right in the middle of their mysterious comeback. In the world of rock music, fake identities are nothing new. Huge bands often disguise themselves to play small clubs without attracting attention. Sometimes it's for secret rehearsals, sometimes to test new songs, sometimes just to feel what it's like to be an underground band again. Foo Fighters once performed as the Holy Shits. Green Day became Foxborough Hot Tubs. Even U2 surprised fans with anonymous street performances. But with the Rolling Stones, it feels different, because they come from an era when rock and roll was still considered dangerous. In the 1960s and 70s, the Rolling Stones weren't just a famous band. They were chaos. Mick Jagger moved like a living provocation. Keith Richards lived on the edge of destruction almost every night. Their concerts sometimes turned into riots. Parents feared them. The media attacked them. And somehow, that only made the world more obsessed. So when the name The Cockroaches suddenly returned, many fans believed it wasn't accidental. It felt like a hidden message, almost as if the Rolling Stones wanted to remind the world that behind the stadium tours, the billions of dollars, and the legendary status, they still see themselves as the dangerous little band that once played smoky underground clubs. And maybe that's why this entire campaign feels so alive. Because this isn't just album promotion. It's nostalgia for a time when rock and roll felt unpredictable, when music wasn't controlled by algorithms, when mystery was more powerful than marketing. And the most fascinating part is this. After more than 60 years as one of the biggest bands in music history, the Rolling Stones still seem to enjoy the game, still enjoying the mystery, still enjoying the chaos, still enjoying making the world curious, like a group of young rebels who still aren't ready to go home.
1, 2, 3, and...
But eventually, the mystery stopped being enough, because fans wanted to know one thing. Can the Rolling Stones still sound dangerous in 2026? That question matters more than people think, because history is filled with legendary bands that stayed together too long, bands that slowly became tribute versions of themselves, repeating old formulas, living off nostalgia, touring the same greatest hits year after year while the world quietly moved on. And honestly, many people expected the Rolling Stones to become exactly that. But then the early reactions to the new material started appearing online. Fans began describing the songs as raw, loud, dirty. Some even said the energy reminded them of the Stones records from the late 70s and early 80s, not when the band still sounded unpredictable. And suddenly, people became curious again. Because this has always been the secret power of the Rolling Stones. They were never about perfection. The Beatles often sounded polished, elegant, revolutionary in a calculated way. But the Stones sounded human, messy, swaggering, dangerous, like a band that might completely fall apart at any second. Yet somehow never does. And maybe that's why younger generations are still discovering them today. Not because they're technically flawless musicians, but because their music still feels alive. There's a certain energy in classic Rolling Stones records that modern music sometimes struggles to recreate. The looseness, the tension, the feeling that the band is balancing between total control and total collapse. And even now, decades later, fans are still searching for that feeling. But perhaps the most shocking thing isn't that the Rolling Stones are releasing another album. It's that people still care. After 60 years, after endless tours, after surviving every possible era of music, they still have the power to make the rock world stop and pay attention. And maybe that tells us something bigger. Maybe rock and roll never truly disappears. Maybe it just waits for the right band to remind the world what it used to feel like. Stones feels almost impossible. It's because this band has nearly destroyed itself so many times. For more than 6 decades, they survived almost everything that could kill a rock band. Ego wars, drug addiction, arrests, internal conflict, changing generations. Media pressure, even the deaths of close friends and band members. Many bands break apart after one failed album. The Rolling Stones survived all of it. And maybe the most complicated relationship in rock history is the one between Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. From the outside, they looked like the perfect creative partnership. But behind the scenes, their relationship was often filled with tension, insults, and periods of complete hatred. Keith once described Mick as unbearable. Mick grew exhausted by Keith's destructive lifestyle. There were years when the two barely spoke to each other. And somehow, out of that tension came some of the greatest rock songs ever written, because the Rolling Stones have always existed between two extremes: chaos and chemistry. And that doesn't even include all the moments when the world truly believed the band was finished. When Brian Jones died in 1969, when Keith Richards nearly destroyed himself with drugs in the 1970s, when rock music changed completely during the grunge and digital eras. And finally, when Charlie Watts passed away in 2021, every single time tragedy hit, people said the same thing. This is the end of the Rolling Stones. But somehow, they always came back. And maybe that's what separates them from almost every other band in music history. The Rolling Stones are no longer just a rock band. They've become a symbol of survival, because the longer they continue, the more unbelievable their story becomes. This band is older than many modern countries. They've lived through generations, technological revolutions, cultural wars, and massive changes in the world itself. And somehow, they are still standing on stage, still playing loud guitars, still making records, still making the world curious. And maybe that's why this comeback feels more emotional than a normal album release, because deep down, many fans realize we may be witnessing the final chapter of the greatest rock and roll band that ever lived. And maybe that's the strangest part of this entire story. Not the billboards, not the secret clues, not even the new album itself. It's the fact that after more than 60 years, the Rolling Stones still matter. In a world where music trends change every week, where artists rise and disappear overnight, the Rolling Stones still have the power to stop the rock world and make people pay attention. That should be impossible. Most bands become memories. The Stones became mythology. They were there when rock and roll was dangerous, when parents feared guitars, when concerts felt unpredictable, when music could still shock society. And somehow, they carried that energy across generations, because the Rolling Stones were never built like normal musicians. They weren't polished superheroes. They looked tired, messy, imperfect, human. And maybe that's exactly why people connected to them for so long. They survived because they represented something bigger than music. Freedom, rebellion, imperfection, survival. The idea that you could fall apart 100 times and still keep moving. And now, decades later, that same spirit still exists. You can hear it in the way Mick Jagger still walks onto a stage like he owns the world. You can hear it in Keith Richards still, holding a guitar like it's an extension of his body. You can feel it every time a stadium crowd screams the opening lines of a Stones song. Maybe rock music no longer dominates popular culture. Maybe the golden age of rock is gone forever. But as long as the Rolling Stones still exist, a piece of that era is still alive. And perhaps that's why this comeback feels emotional for so many people. Because deep down, fans understand something they don't want to say out loud. One day, the Rolling Stones will finally stop. One day, there will be no more tours. No more mystery campaigns. No more loud guitars shaking stadium walls. But until that day comes, the Stones keep rolling. Maybe this album won't change the future of music. But after 60 years, the Rolling Stones don't need to prove anything anymore. The fact that they are still here, still loud, still chaotic, still fascinating the world, might already be the greatest rock and roll story ever told.